little movie perp in dishonor of ComicsGate. Prepared a little thing for us.
I will remember you.
The comic book market tests these characters. If it's not popular in the comics, it's not going to be popular in the movies.
Will you remember me?
No, he'll never stop me from killing Chinese people. Ever.
Don't let your life pass you by, and weep not for them.
Well, I and you know, a few of my friends here represent a group of fans who have been disrespected by people like Zack Snyder and the people all around
Hey guys, how you doing?
for years.
Yeah, so you wanted to say a few things. Let me
Sure.
let me see if I can prioritize you here.
Yeah, I'm the priority.
All
All right. So, a famous writer once said, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." If that's true, then ComicsGate has failed spectacularly, unless you include quality grade A cringe. They provided one of the most limp-dicked movements since Gamergate. Their biggest win is when a DC or Marvel comic doesn't get published. That's the extent of their victories. That is the extent of their victories, and it's usually celebrated on Twitter. Think about that. But people ask, what about the comics? What about the comics? No, they're not asking me or Dane. They're literally asking Ethan. Where's our comic, Ethan? Keep in mind, I'm yelling this at a gravestone. Okay, so same results either way. And judging, okay, so that's where I got to, and then I just stole this monologue from a movie. From the oldest of times, people danced for a number of reasons. They danced in prayer, or so that their crops would grow and would be plentiful. They would dance so their hunt would be good, and they danced to stay physically fit and show their community spirit. And they danced to celebrate. And that is the dancing that we're talking about. That was from Kevin Bacon, Flashdance. Thank you.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. You know, I think I'll just go ahead and begin the my specially prepared eulogy.
Mm-hmm.
I might have to stop and take this shit off my head and put my glasses on if it gets too difficult to read. But if you're a fan of this channel, you know that I've put a lot into talking about ComicsGate. And after, you know, a little bit later, once we get through the eulogizing, I'll let you know why in particular, like, you know, I could keep kicking the dead horse that is ComicsGate. It's easy content. You know, it probably gets almost as many clicks as the most popular stuff that I do, just because, but it's easy. You know, I'm trying to do better than just like piss on the dead corpse of, you know, just something, you know, I'll get into the details why, but yeah. So, and then mine's not going to be as funny necessarily. Like, I'm actually, you know, kind of came at this from, I should have gone first. So now you guys are going to be expecting a bunch of comedy. But, you know, it's heartfelt.
Mine wasn't supposed to be funny either.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, ComicsGate.
All right. Eulogy for ComicsGate. On this day, as we begin the year 2022 in the year of our Lord, we pay remembrance to the loose association of awful people known as ComicsGate. Beginning with a few comic creators who happened to have vaginas getting milkshakes together, a few very stupid and hateful people felt threatened and got extremely triggered. They began to post and tweet and make videos about how SJWs are ruining comics. Of course, the SJWs equal bad narrative was not original, as the deceased movement was sadly incapable of creating anything that is original. YouTube had already been inundated with anti-SJW content for a few years prior to that, but like parasites, they latched on to the trend of reactionary, dim-witted anti-SJW content that had gained dominance by virtue of being easy, lazy, and repetitive content. This content, when consumed by audiences over and over, has the effect of literally brainwashing the poor angry lads. They began to believe SJWs were everyone who is not ComicsGate. Everyone who simply enjoys comics and doesn't harbor hostile feelings towards queer people, people of color, and women. Of course, ComicsGate does have some queer, people of color, and female fans, but they're few and far between. ComicsGate uses these fans as a shield against the accusations effectively tokenizing them. It becomes a club for bitter old forgotten comic pros. Forgotten if anyone really knew who they were in the first place. They can't make decent comics, and they can't get their shitty comics out on time. Their entire business model is using misinformation and thinly veiled bigotry to rile up old men who haven't read comics in decades, or exploit mentally ill and autistic young men who have nothing positive in their lives. And they do circle jerk streams where they monetize their audience as little pay pigs, who not only send money for projects that are mediocre at best, but often aren't released at all. In August 2018, original ComicsGate grifter Richard Meyer tried to lead a harassment campaign against Eve L. Ewing when she was hired at Marvel. What resulted was the first time a great number of actual comics pros began to speak out against ComicsGate. Superstar writer Tom Taylor began the hashtag accurately calling ComicsGate a hate group. And legendary author Neil Gaiman called out Meyer directly. ComicsGate claimed that the late comics creator Darwin Cook, who blessed the world with such books as Justice League New Frontier, would have supported their hateful agenda. When Cook's widow, Marcia, responded on Twitter by stating that her husband would absolutely have not supported ComicsGate, Ethan Van Sciver and many other ComicsGaters began harassing her, telling her she's wrong about her husband, that she's lying about her husband, calling her names and generally being pieces of rotten shit toward her. Water break. It's about to get good, I promise. In late 2019, an enormous rift emerged in ComicsGate, perhaps the first signal of the demise of the pathetic scam/cult/hate group. War Campaign was a loose organization of EVS pay pigs and sycophants who acted as Ethan's attack dogs. This group would engage in most of the harassment, doxing, and hate mobbing against LGBTQ and POC creators and fans, and anyone who accurately described the attitude and actions of ComicsGate. War Campaign acted autonomously, at least publicly, allowing Ethan Van Sciver and ComicsGate reasonable doubt when it came to the many victims of their targeted abuse. Many of Ethan Van Sciver's fans turned on him at this point, and War Campaign splintered off into its own thing. War Campaign still exists, and they pretend to be supportive and inclusive of minority fans, despite pushing the same anti-SJW, anti-everything mainstream, anti-woke narratives in order to sell their own shitty products. Most of the targets of ComicsGate criticism, the SJWs and radical leftists who ComicsGate have always claimed are awful and fans hate, have continued to be successful. Many of them have become some of the most beloved and high-selling creators in the industry. ComicsGate spends most of its time twisting facts and flat-out lying in order to maintain their narrative, even as they hemorrhage supporters and their reputation has continued to decay beyond any hope of growth. Gail Simone, beloved writer and social media figure, has continued to thrive despite incessant demonization by ComicsGate and her former co-worker Ethan Van Sciver. Tom King, also a target of ComicsGate, continues to thrive. Scott Snyder also continues to thrive, as well as build his own indie comics bibliography. Mark Waid, who was the target of a frivolous lawsuit by Richard Meyer, continues to thrive after Meyer's suit proved to be too weak for Meyer to even stand behind. Donny Cates, who Ethan regularly whines about, is one of the most popular writers in mainstream comics and is also selling his indie comics like hotcakes. Mark Brooks, who I interviewed last month and has since done quite a bit of roasting of ComicsGate since, is one of the go-to cover artists for Marvel. Actual professionals, whether mainstream or indie, regularly roast ComicsGate on Twitter, and there are dozens of Twitter users who dedicate their time to spotlighting the deception, hypocrisy, bigotry, and abuse perpetrated by proponents of ComicsGate. ComicsGate fans have never been too cautious about being openly bigoted, but lately, even the most well-known figures in the cult have gone mask off. Racism, anti-Semitism, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, all are easy to find from ComicsGate with even a cursory glance at their posts and threads and videos. Indie creators such as Chloe Handler have been harassed and abused online for years, but Chloe's turned that to her favor by monetizing their hate speech and abuse, self-publishing her own comic, The Astonishing Gators. Gators is legally distinct from any ComicsGate figures, but incidentally mocks ComicsGate and their pathetic ongoing man tantrum. Mantrum? Extremely effectively. ComicsGate's most well-known creators, such as Ethan's Cyberfrog colorist Kyle Baker, are broke, asking
Kyle
for
Ritter.
donations. Oh, that's it. Yeah, sorry.
Kyle Baker's good.
My bad. Yeah, thank you.
No worries.
Asking for donations on social media because he's unable to support his family. Despite writing or coloring for a comic book that has made allegedly over $1 million. Kyle has also incidentally been exposed as sexually harassing women in the ComicsGate community. All 2 of them, I imagine. Ethan apparently knew about these allegations, but covered them up in order to promote his lame-ass Cyberfrog crowdfund. Richard Meyer, who was pushed out of his leadership role of ComicsGate by EVS, craps out Indiegogo campaigns despite not finishing the comics he promises. And the quality of his comics he has released is, well, objectively bad. Van Sciver himself has only fulfilled a couple of 48-page comics with boring stories and mediocre art, despite raising over $1 million. He's late on at least 1 book and continues to intentionally procrastinate, seemingly out of resentment for his pay pigs. He has successfully monetized a segment of mentally ill and hateful losers who spend their time online defending what to any sane person is objectively a scam. Ethan picks fights with less popular ComicsGate creators, maintaining his place atop the pyramid and allowing a perpetual flow of enemies to rally his pay pigs against. He sometimes receives thousands of dollars via super chats on YouTube, and the cultists paying him absurd sums just to repeat shit that equates to SJW bad. One prominent ComicsGator who Ethan openly defended and supported and considered his friend is now in prison after being caught with over 3,000 images of children in exploitative sexual contexts. Sick Jimmy Love, whose comics should have been a clear red flag for any decent person to avoid him, was welcomed and promoted in the degenerate cesspit that is ComicsGate. There are many ComicsGators who still defend Sick Jimmy's involvement, while the others attempt to erase his involvement retroactively. The number of abandoned CG projects campaigns is pathetically hilarious. These campaigns are usually funded via Indiegogo, which allowed creators to keep the funds even if they didn't hit the initial goal. Indiegogo was the only platform that allowed this, at least a popular platform that allowed this. But recently, IG announced several changes to their service, including changes to that policy, as well as more scrutiny for the creators. Presumably, if Indiegogo keeps their word and refuses service to anyone engaging in harmful, hateful behavior and language, ComicsGate's ability to raise money for their scams will be crippled. Their initial stock rhetoric was that sales were down on mainstream SJW comics, but every year since their inception, sales have risen. Now sales are at an all-time high, and despite their attempts to distort the numbers to their benefit, if not flat out lying, the industry continues to surge, and comics have grown outside fringe nerd culture into a mainstream medium, drawing new readers of all demographics. ComicsGate cannot sell comics on the merits of their work. They rely on non-stop YouTube streams that pump false info into their audience's sponge-like cult-programmed pickled brains, which is absolutely necessary to keep sucking cash from the pay pigs while rarely actually providing them a product. The final nail in the coffin came just recently. Heather Antos, one of the aforementioned Marvel creators who was targeted for simply getting a milkshake with her coworkers, who were female, and was used as proof of the SJW caused decline of comics, was recently promoted to senior editor at IDW Comics. Yeah, if you don't see it by now, if there's any ComicsGators watching, I'm done reaching out to you. I spent the better part of a year trying to find ways to approach this stuff that maybe if you were open to any kind of reason that you could connect with it. And I've actually been successful in some examples. I haven't counted them up, but at least the people that have reached out to me, it's probably at least a dozen people who I've gotten through to them. 2 of them on stream. There's a video up now from like last week or the week before. Happened live on stream. But if you're not, if you don't see it by now, if you're still so delusional about SJWs and wokeness, you're fucking lost. You're a lost soul, and I don't give a shit about your complaints or trying to paint ComicsGate as anything but what it is, a hate group and a scam. If Ethan wants to say anything about anything that I've said about him, because he's not covering me anymore on his streams like he did originally. When I was a little small channel, and he could easily pick on me and stuff, and my arguments maybe weren't so articulate or refined, he would, as soon as I would put a video up, he would talk about it. He doesn't do that anymore. He'll still talk about what I'm saying, but he won't mention me because he's afraid to platform me in front of his audience. He knows that my content is bad for his bottom line. But if he decides that he wants to, hash these things out, he's welcome to do so on my channel, under my rules. Okay? With fact checking. But that's the only way it's going to happen.